is a short little video on Lesson 102, Introduction to Functions. Before we get to what this actually is we're solving, I want to kind of go over a couple of things. F of x you've seen before means just it's a function with the variable x. Now, a lot of times we will replace this with y. However, in this type of problem, we're not going to do that because we're actually solving for something that involves the f of x. Okay? So the y is really when we're trying to graph the function, and then that's not the case for this problem. So what we're going to do, this says to find f of g of x. That looks really confusing, and it is. But the concept is very similar to if it were asking you to find f of 3. Right? If you were asked to find f of 3, what you would do is notice the x is now a 3, so that's what we're going to do in the problem. We're going to replace the x with a 3 and we'd solve. The concept is very similar. Okay, instead of having it be f of 3, it's f of g. So anytime I see an x in my f of x, I'm going to insert g. And I like to go ahead and replace the x with a parentheses, so that helps me to know where I'm going to input my g of x. All right, so I've put that there, and now I'm going to put g of x into that spot, which is x minus 6 over 5. Now, the next step is to simplify. So we would get 2x minus 12 over 5 plus 5, which doesn't look very nice. And so we need to have a common denominator. The common denominator in this case is 5. So I'm going to multiply my other fraction by 5 over 5. Which gives us 25 over 5. Now we can add those together, giving us 2x minus 12 plus 25. And one last step is just combining the like terms, which would be the 12 and the 25, giving us 13. All right, so we have found, it's called a composition of f of g of x. That one was a little bit tricky. All right, now let's do another example of the same concept. All right, so again, this one's s of t of x, and so anytime I have an s, I'm going to an x, I'm going to replace it with the parentheses. All right, and anytime I have those parentheses, I'm going to insert t, which is 4x minus 3. Now, this one here is not so easy. When we say 4x minus 3 squared, or when we say anything squared, it's being multiplied by itself. We're going to distribute. All right, now, if you remember, we're going to use FOIL first. So 4x times 4x is 16x squared. Outside, 4x times negative 3 is negative 12x. inside, negative 12x again, and then last, negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. All right, now we have to find our common terms. All right, so we have a negative 12x and a negative 12x and a positive 12x. So one of the negatives and the positive cancel. So we're just left with negative 12x. And then here again, we have a positive 9 and a negative 9, and those can cancel. So we're left with 16x squared minus 12x minus 6. All right, one last problem. This f negative 1 of x simply means inverse. You heard us talk about inverse in lesson 101, where we talked about the inverse operations. Now we're talking about the inverse of a function. So the first step in finding the inverse is we replace f of x with y. All right, the second step is to switch x and y. So if we do that, we get x equals 3y plus 8. I'll write that a little bit better. And then the third step is to solve for y. So to do that, we have to move the 8 to the other side, and we do that by subtracting. And then we solve for y, so we're dividing by 3. So y equals x minus 8 over 3. And now notice, to make sure we know it's an inverse, we replace it with f negative 1 of x instead of y. And lastly, we need to find f negative 1 of 2. So like we talked about before, that's just simply replacing all of the x's with that number. So 2 minus 8 is negative 6 over 3, which would give us negative 2. So our two answers, f negative 1 of x, which is our inverse, is x minus 8 over 3, or f negative 1 of 2 is equal to negative 2. I hope you found this video useful. If you have any other questions, please contact your instructor.